Uncle Trev and the Fast Chew by Jack Lasenby. I saw Uncle Trev's truck at the garage one day, and I ran home to tell Mum. She was getting the flour ready to make bread, but she listened and said Uncle Trev must be having trouble with his truck. I'm always surprised when I see him still driving that noisy thing, she said. Never thought he'd give up his horses. He used to maintain that a heavy wagon could carry everything he'd ever need. He had a light cart to use around the farm. What about when he wanted to come into Waharoa? I asked. Well, he used to ride in. He kept a couple of light hacks, and he had his jig. If he wanted to pick up something or give someone a lift. Still, I said, must be faster than the truck. Oh, yeah, but you know your uncle. He was never in any hurry in those days. Grass kept growing by itself. The sheep didn't need to be taught how to eat it, he said. That was till he got one of those harebrained ideas of his. What was that? I asked. I liked hearing about Uncle Trev's harebrained ideas. I don't know that I should tell you, said Mum. After all, it happened so long ago, and I want you to pop down to the shop for me. Oh, tell us, I said. Mum always pretended to be angry with Uncle Trev, but I knew she liked telling stories about him and his half-baked ideas, and how they always went wrong. She always said his farm would have been a different place if she'd been running it. Oh, you know your uncle, Mum said, forever wanting to do things better, as if the way the Lord made things wasn't good enough for him. What did he do? He had one of those harebrained ideas of his. He thought if he taught his calves to chew faster, they'd grow bigger, produce more milk, when they were cows. It sounded like one of Uncle Trev's ideas. Yeah, I said. Well, Mum said. She thumped the dough on the wooden bench. I liked watching her make bread. She pummeled the dough as if she was giving it a hiding. She shoved it, twisted it, tore it apart, rolled it together again. Her arms looked very strong when she was kneading dough. I wouldn't have liked to be kneaded. Not like that. She swung it up, donged it down on the bench, and poked holes in it with her fingers. I could see it wasn't ready yet, because it didn't puff and fill in the holes, the way that good dough does. Well, Mum said, breathing hard, it's hard work kneading dough. He started taking his meals outside and eating with the calves. He thought if he chewed faster, they might copy him. Did they? Course not. They just chewed as they always do. So what did he do? He tried it on some newborn calves and some day-old lambs. He took his cup of tea outside and drank it fast in front of them. He thought it might work better on the younger animals, he said, because they should have more open minds. And did it? He thought some of them were learning, but he still wasn't satisfied, so he made a contraption, a sort of framework. He had to get Mr. Fortune to make the metal parts. Who's Mr. Fortune? You've heard me talk of Mr. Fortune. He was the blacksmith then. His wife was such a nice little person. I was really sorry when they moved away from Waharoa. They went somewhere over Te Aroha. What about the contraption? Just listen, I'll get to it. Well, Mr. Fortune was very clever with his hands, and he saw what your uncle wanted as a framework that fitted over a calf's head. It had springs on it and long reins that you could work from a distance. The idea was that your uncle would pull on them, and the calf would have to chew faster. Did it work? Oh, it worked all right, but not in the way your uncle intended. Why? What happened? Mum had rolled the dough into a big ball. It was bouncier now when she prodded it. I could see it was quite firm to her fingers. Can I have a bit to eat? I asked. You don't want to be eating dough, she said. It's tasteless. Oh, all right. Take this, but don't go bothering me for any more. It was tasteless too, but I knew that. I always had to taste a bit of whatever Mum was baking. Cakes, biscuits were the best. I didn't know why she bothered to put them in the oven. We could have just eaten the mixture. Dough and scone mixture, they were pretty dull, but they always looked as if they'd taste all right. Well, Mum said, he took the wretched contraption home with him and tried it on one of his calves. I've never known anyone like your uncle to have daft ideas. Next day, he was back in with the silly thing again. So didn't it work? Oh, it worked all right, too well. What was wrong then? Mum separated the dough into two pieces, put it in a couple of baking tins. She covered them with a tea towel and set them in the hot water cupboard. Get me a bucket of coal, she said. I'd better heat up the oven. That dough won't take long to rise. I ran out and filled the bucket. Mum made a cup of tea. She put a shovel of coal on the fire and sat down. I sat beside her and listened to the stove. It ticked. It was a sucking noise. The top damper was drawing, and she'd closed the other one so the flames were going right around the oven before they could get up the chimney. So why did Uncle Trev bring the contraption back if it worked? He had to bring it back, Mum said. She poured herself a cup of tea and put the teapot to the side of the stove. He couldn't get it off. What, off the calf? No, off himself. He thought he'd try it out first when he got home. He'd put it on his own head. He tied the ends of the reins to the fence and pulled against them, and it worked wonderfully, so he said, making him chew every time he pulled against them. He went out to the paddock to catch a calf, but they ran away when they saw the contraption on his head. He was chasing them, and when he tripped over the reins, and when he got up, of course, the blessed thing wouldn't come off. He said he tried everything. He butted his head, wouldn't come off. Put it in the door, tried to pull it off, but it just jammed all the harder. He had to sleep in the thing, but couldn't put his head down properly. So he got out his jig and drove down to that friend of his, that Billy Burns. You can imagine what he did. Of course, he's no better than your uncle. He pulled the reins and made your uncle chew. Then he tried to pull it off and nearly tore off your uncle's ears. In the end, your Uncle Trevor had to drive all the way into Waharoa in his jig with that contraption on his head. The children were all outside the school when he drove past, and they ran alongside and cheered him. So what did he have to do but stop his jig, get down, and chase them? I'd never been so embarrassed in all my born days. There I was, coming down Seddon Street with the mail, the paper, and there was my brother, chasing the children with that contraption over his head. I tell you, I got him back on that jig pretty smartly, and drove him round to the blacksmith's myself. Of course, everyone in Waharoa had to be out on the street that day. They all wanted to keep him in the thing. Mr. Whistler, the station master, said he wanted to tie him down to the station platform, show him off to passengers on the Rotorua Express as it went through. And the postmaster took a photograph of your uncle and sent it into the weekly news. And all the time, there was your uncle grinning and bobbing his silly head, showing how the contraption made him chew if he pulled on the reins. I sent them all packing about their business, I can tell you. Mr. Fortune tried to tell me he couldn't get it off your uncle's head without taking off his ears too, but he got it off quickly enough when I seized hold of some big metal cutters and attacked it myself. By that time, half of Waharoa was standing outside the big doors of the blacksmith shop. They all cheered when it came off. Your uncle's jaw was sore with all that chewing. He had a couple of raw spots on his chin. I was mortified. I made him get up on his jig and drive straight home out to the farm. I wasn't going to make him a cup of tea after that performance, I told him. I wonder if that's where he got his idea from for his false teeth, I said. What false teeth? Asked my mother. Oh, nothing. Just something he was saying the other day, I said. Mum looked at her bread. It had risen under the tea towel, so she put it in the oven and closed the top damper. Never known such a man for coming up with a harebrained scheme like that, she said. I thought I'd better not tell her that Uncle Trev had another idea, one that sounded even better. Thought it might be safer to wait and just let her find out for herself.